Hey, everybody. It's time for another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. I am Suzanne Johnson, your head coach at G.R.A.C.E Financial Coaching, and I am super excited to welcome my friend and fellow coach, Jesse Ernst. Jesse, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Great to have you. He's calling in from the great state of Florida. And Jesse's the owner of Ernst Financial Solutions. He specializes in biblically based, goal oriented, intentional coaching. I love that. He works with couples, individuals, small business owners. And Jesse will help his clients build a plan, good money habits, and behaviors that will help win in the long term. And something I just learned about Jesse, even though I've known Jesse for a while now, is Jesse is bilingual in English and Spanish. So, Jesse, how did you get that skill?
Yeah, so growing up, my family was missionaries in Mexico. So from the time I was 4, I lived in Spanish-speaking countries until I left for college. Lived in Costa Rica for a year and then in Mexico for 15 years.
That is awesome. What was can you say you had a favorite area?
I lived in the same town from the time I was 6 until like I was 20. So it's a pretty awesome, pretty cool little town. It grew from like 4,000 people and now it's about 40,000 people over the course of the last 25 years. It's like
That's
grown
unbelievable.
extremely. Yeah. So it's just outside the city of Saltillo, which is it's a city of just over 1 million people. And there's a lot of manufacturing, a lot of car parts, car seat manufacturers. And so there's a lot of jobs there. It's referred to as the Detroit of Mexico, back when Detroit was
Detroit.
right.
Okay, so I actually do know the area you're talking about then. That's really interesting. So 4,000 people to 40,000 people over the course of 20 or 25 years. And when you were there, was it growing exponentially as well?
Yeah, when I left for college, it had hit like that 20-ish thousand people. So it had like 5x'd its growth in the 15 years that I lived there.
That's amazing. What a cool childhood. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell us about your coaching company, because you are also a very successful financial coach.
Well, I appreciate the accolades. So I started, I'm going to back up way before coaching. Right after my wife and I got married, my brother sent me, back when Financial Peace University was on DVD, he sent me DVDs. And he was like, you need to take this. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's a financial course. This is going to be boring as all get out. And we got into it and I'm like, Dave's hilarious. Like he calls people stupid who are being stupid. And so the brashness was a turn on for me. I was like, yes, let's do this. And so we've been walking the financial peace journey for 10 years now. And my wife and I love to travel. So we just made it a line item in our budget. We both graduated from college debt free. We've purchased vehicles and never had a car payment, never had credit card debt. So people are going to be like, well, what lesson have you learned? Because you did all those things we did right, per se. Right. But I'll talk about some of my own stupidity that I dragged my wife into. So we were walking that journey and people were like, how do you guys travel so much? And we're like, it's a line item in our budget. And they're like, how do you budget? And so I would just help friends and family through that and say, it's about prioritizing. And anytime somebody would give me the must be nice phrase, I'm like, it is nice, but you can make different choices too. So I listened to, Dave comes on the radio between 3 and 5 here, all on weekdays. And he said about 2 years ago, I heard him say, if you're answering these people's questions who call in before I get a chance to interrupt them, you should check out Financial Coach Master Training. And I was like, okay, let me look into that. And I told my wife about it and she's like, yeah, that's you. That's what you should do. And we were in a transition phase in life anyways. And I was just really trying to figure out what that next step was. And I was like, this is it. So went through the training. Right after the training was right when I finished up my previous job as a student pastor. I was at the same church for 6 years. And then we took a month off and just traveled around in our camper for a month before I started. So I didn't start the business. I mean, I've been kind of coaching people for a while, but I didn't start Ernst Financial Solutions until August 1st of 2020.
Right. And I'm totally with you. I was one of those people who the person would pick up the phone and, Dave would pick up the call. And within 10 seconds, I'm like, oh God, this is going to be so painful for this person.
Right.
Because
This is what he's going to
exactly how
say.
Dave was going to answer it. Right.
And I would almost sit there and make bets with myself on how many times is he going to say the word stupid, or did you pay attention, or you flunked FPU.
We could make a really good drinking game out of Dave's show.
Right? How many times is he going to say stupid? Oh, you said 3 and I said 2 and it was 2.
Right? Take a shot. Oh my gosh, that would be done by hour. Definitely be done by hour 1 for sure.
Right.
There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah. Passed out on the floor,
Exactly.
pointing and laughing at each other.
Yep. So you mentioned that you were a youth pastor, and before we got on live, you said you were going to be speaking at a conference this weekend. So tell us a little bit about that part of your background, and then how that's translated into what you're doing next weekend.
Yeah, so I grew up in ministry. My dad was a youth pastor at a church in Georgia when I was born. So I was born from Georgia. Go Dogs. We're having a good year this year.
Yes.
And then was called to the mission field. So grew up in ministry and felt like God was calling me to that. But at the time, my vision of ministry was always staff on church, church staff. That was my view of ministry. Since then, my view has kind of shifted. And now I tell people I'm in the ministry of money. Because it's ministering to couples, it's ministering to people's hearts, it's ministering to people's emotional, mental stability, stress reduction, and I come at it from a biblically based perspective. But I was a youth pastor here in Central Florida for 6 years. Before that, I interned at a church. Before that, I worked with a group from my college, and we went to a juvenile detention center every Sunday. Would play basketball with kids, dunk on them, and then tell them about Jesus. So during my years as a youth pastor, I went to the same camp every year, and I'm usually the same time of year. And so I met my friend Patrick, who's a youth pastor in South Carolina, and told him, hey, I'm not full-time youth pastoring, but I'm opening up for some speaking engagements and speaking opportunities to youth, whether that's, youth camps or people who want to talk about finances. I'm happy to come to churches or venues to speak about finance as well. So he called me and he said, hey, we do a youth fall retreat with our kids every year. Would you be interested? And I'm like, yeah, that'd be fantastic. So leaving tomorrow, I'll be driving up to South Carolina and we'll be speaking 4 times over the next 3 days, and then coming back on Sunday, just speaking about what the power of the gospel and the power of our personal story is, and our personal story and our testimony.
Gotcha. Make sure to get some good little financial tidbits in there to save those kids from student loans, okay?
Right. Actually, last week I got the opportunity to go speak in a local high school to freshmen, sophomores, and their parents, which I love that they incorporated the parents, about how to go to college debt-free, what the current economic climate is around student loans, how I did it debt-free, and then what they can be doing now as freshmen and sophomores to set themselves up for success, not just in college, but coming out of college, and what that investment looks like. I use a chart that shows if you invested your student loan payment for 10 years at 10%, this is what it is, 20 years and 30 years. And I said, look, guys, I just told y'all how to become millionaires before 60, just by avoiding student loans and investing it instead.
I actually had that reminds me of a client I had. I actually had coached her parents, and then they said, can you meet with our daughter once? And I usually didn't do that, but I was like, all right, well, I've worked with you guys for a while now, so I'll meet with, we'll call her April. And I met with April once at a coffee shop. This is when I was still in San Diego.
April 1. So is this April Fool's?
Yeah, no. This is a real person. It's a real person. So we're sitting in a coffee shop in San Diego, and it was one of those coffee shops that, like, after 4:00 they start serving wine. And like an hour into this conversation, I'm like, thank God this place serves wine, because the second she leaves, I'm going over there and turning my coffee in for a glass of wine. I'm at like an hour and 5 minutes with her, and I'm like, I am just not getting through to her, because she wanted to go to grad school, and she wanted to do. They had committed to doing her undergrad with no debt, so she walked away with a 4-year degree with no debt. But she wanted to do her graduate work, and she wanted to do it immediately.
Right, I want it.
And she was in a field where she could have gone to work for a little bit and then gotten the advanced degree, but she wanted to do it immediately. And at like an hour and 5 minutes, I'm like, I just pull out a compound interest chart and I just start typing in numbers. I didn't even go I just did the interest. I was like, look at what you could build if you took. It was my final, it was like a Hail Mary, basically. I was like, if this doesn't work with her, she's going to take out $180,000.
Suzanne's dropping back in shotgun formation. Here's the Hail Mary.
I'm like, all right, I got to try something. And I showed her the compound interest calculator, and her face was just, to literally say you watched the light bulb go on would be an understatement. It was life-changing for her. I actually just spoke to her mother yesterday. I hadn't talked to her in a really long time. And she told me that April did end up going to school. But what happened was they ended up getting scholarships. They ended up getting grants. She ended up working. And so there was a piece that she did take out in student loans, but it was being paid down immediately, basically, based on the work that she was doing full-time while also going to school part-time. So we kind of met in the middle, but let me tell you, man, that made me feel a lot. And we've got to let these people make their own choices, right? We're not going to hold a gun to their head, but that made me feel so much better than hearing, oh yeah, she ended up taking $180,000 in student loans, So I was like, all right, that's a good middle of the road compromise.
Right, because people don't see how suffocating that is. They said, oh, well, everybody does it. Yeah, but if you talk to everybody that Suzanne and I talk to, you see how suffocating that is. Yeah. I just met with one of the very first clients I started with back last September. Just met with them on Monday. They had $300,000 in student loans, $60,000 had accumulated of interest, $507,000 in non-mortgage debt. And they said, this is going to take us 10 years. Our second coaching session, they said, we can do it in 5. By our third coaching session, I said, let's put a month and year on it. What's your target date? They said August 2022. And I was like, oh my gosh. You told me you didn't want to go crazy and have no life for 2 years. They said, yeah, but there's a difference. We see a different future. As of Monday, they've paid off $421,594 of the 507. They said, we need to change our target date to January 31st.
I was going to say, they got to move it up now. Yeah. That's insane. That is unbelievable. That really shows what the power of motivation plus commitment really can do. It's unreal.
And that feeling of suffocation. They're like, we don't sleep. We don't have peace.
Yeah.
We just don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I had friends out of college who met in law school. And I distinctly remember when they both left law school, they were at about $330,000 in student loan debt. And even back then, when I was 20, because I graduated early, so 24 years old, I realized how insane that was, how crazy that was. Yeah. So, Jesse, let's talk about some stupid stuff that you've done. You've obviously been able to help a lot of people get away from their stupid mistakes, but you've done some stuff yourself. Yeah. So, Jesse, what's the dumbest thing you've ever done with money?
So, the dumbest thing we've ever done with money is we did get an adjustable rate mortgage. And I mostly listened to Dave. It had been a while since we took financial peace, and it wasn't coaching. So, there's my caveat. We took a 20-year mortgage out instead of a 15. Not that big a deal, but the adjustable rate mortgage has changed quite a bit. What had happened was everybody told me right out of college, they're like, hey, you need a credit card. You need to build your credit. And I was like, well, I'm not going to pay interest on car payments, and I'm not going to pay interest on anything. So I got denied by Walmart for a credit card because I had no credit history, and I had a debt-free degree. And so I ended up going somewhere where I actually talked to a human instead of being put through a computer. And I was like, this is great. I got a credit card, and I paid it off every month. Right. And so that's the responsible thing to do. Went through FPU, and I was like, yeah, but I pay it off every month. And I never ever in the time that I had my credit card, I never paid a dime of interest. So it built my credit score up to like a upper sevens. We added my wife to it when we got married, but she was added as a user, not as a co-applicant. So when we went to go apply for a mortgage, which was the point of the credit card, right, we still had to do manual underwriting because her credit score was 0. And I was a youth pastor. And so one of the interesting things about youth pastors, in the tax law, they just say members of the clergy. Which sounds way more official than any youth pastor wants. There's like, no, I'm a member of the clergy, reverend.
Right, exactly.
Because most churches don't have parsonages anymore. There's a tax break that's for a housing allowance that
Yes.
Ministers can write off up to 60%. And so the banks didn't know what to do with that because it's in one of those line items on my W-2 that they're like, we don't even know what this is. So to them, it looked like I made $9,000 a year.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
because Claire's credit score was 0, they wouldn't even look at her income. So I'm like, but this is housing allowance. This is specifically to pay you guys.
Right.
So I went through the manual underwriting process. We'd already picked out a house. We were under the gun. So when people say, well, I had to do this, and so I rushed into it, we rushed into the mortgage process. I should have gotten a 15-year fixed rate. And I was like, well, I'll just refinance it before it adjusts and do all that kind of stuff. And, that's what they tell you to do. They're like, we can do the manual underwriting. The cool thing about manual underwriting is I've gone through the process. So when I talk to people about it, I know what I'm talking about. It's been 6 years ago now, but they're like, list out all your assets. And so we list out our cash and our vehicles, and they let me put my life insurance on there. So it made my net worth look really good.
Wow.
Basically, they're like, well, if something happens to you, this house will be paid off.
Right.
And we're buying a house in the $150,000 range. It wasn't like we're trying to buy a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 house on a youth pastor salary. Then they said, all right, list out your liabilities. So it's all on one sheet. They're like, and I was like, okay, I'm done. They're like, what about student loans? Never had them. What about your car? They're paid for. I said, I wrote a check for them. And, car salesmen are always like, well, you need to build your credit to buy a house. I'm like, that's my business. I was like, if you don't want to be fired as my salesperson, don't bring up car payments.
Right. And take this check and walk away with it.
and I fired salespeople, and I walked over to the next person. I said, I don't want to work with him. If you'll talk to me about cash, then I'll work with you.
Right.
They're like, what do I do? I was like, well, we can go talk to the manager now. So my wife hates to be there when I'm negotiating for a new car. I'm like, just go scroll through Instagram over there.
That's the most fun part, though, is beating up the salespeople.
But we're coaches, Suzanne. We love it. I purchased her a new car, a 2012, back in January, which I didn't know it was going to be the perfect time to purchase because then the cars have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
And we got within $500, and I knew that I could pay it, but I wanted to be $500 cheaper. And the guy's like, are you going to walk over $500? I said, are you going to let me walk over $500?
Yes.
And I kept like a straight face. He's like, I'm going to talk to the manager again. And they wouldn't budge on it. I said, well, I need spare keys. And they're like, those are $300 keys. I was like, retail? I said, it costs you guys $30. I said, and I came up $500. I said, so let me see if we can find one. I said, find one, cut one. I don't care.
Right.
I was like, I'm not paying $300 for a key.
No. Oh my God. That is the biggest ripoff that we could have. We'll do a whole hour on cars one day. Seriously.
I know. And negotiating cars. I've gotten 18 to 20% off every vehicle that we've purchased.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Off sticker price. So back to the mortgage, back to the stupidest thing, lessons learned, dumbest thing I've ever done with money. So we rushed into it. The people were super nice. It's a local bank. I literally go through the drive-through and pay my mortgage because I'm like, I just want to go say hi to them. It's like 5 minutes from my house.
That's hilarious.
I have it set up online, and sure, that's convenient, but it's also, I've built a relationship with the bank, which now being a financial coach, I didn't know, hey, you've been building this relationship for 5 years. Now it's like, hey guys, I'm on your team. So that's been cool. And it's adjusted a couple times, and we've looked into refinancing. Our house was a fixer-upper. So we put 20% down. Good. Yay. Not a dumb thing. Didn't ever pay PMI. But it needed a lot of work. We had pink shag carpet, like Pepto-Bismol pink.
Nice.
And mauve wallpaper.
Yes.
I think there's
exactly
still
like
wallpaper.
Dave talks about in the mortgage lesson.
Still wallpaper under our fingernails. And I'm a handyman, so I did everything except for the popcorn ceilings and spraying that myself. So we cash flowed all of our repairs, and we came in $10,000 under budget. And so I was like, okay, so I'm going to tell you how I fixed the dumb thing, a big portion of the dumb thing. We went to the bank, we put the $10,000 on the principal, and it shaved 4.5 years off. So we went from a 20-year to a 15-year, like within 13 months of starting that. And then as far as the refi, I've looked at it, but our break-even point, we're paying aggressively on the house, and so my goal is to pay it off in the next 2 years by my 35th birthday, um,
Nice.
and then live the next, however many years I have left with never a mortgage again.
That's
Um,
amazing.
but the break-even point, even for the refinance fees, would take me 4.5 years, and I was like, it is a sucky interest rate. I'm at 4.75%. When everybody's like, I just got a 2.9. I'm like, yeah, but you just restarted 30 years or restarted
Yeah,
15.
I just saw a 2.7 about a month ago. I was almost
Wow.
dropped out of my chair. Yeah.
I was like, our payments. So I mean, it would save us $80 a month. So it wouldn't make that big of a difference because of the extra that we've paid on it. Had we
Right.
had we been on schedule and behind, it would make total sense.
Right.
But now I reached out to Churchill, and they text me like once a month now. They're like, hey, you still interested? And I'm like, I told the last person that the break-even analysis doesn't work out for me.
Right, right. Yeah. And Churchill Mortgage, just for our viewers who are not familiar with them, they're one of the few entities out there that still do manual underwriting. It's actually very difficult to find, but they are amazing to work with. I've directed several of my clients in their direction. And honestly, sometimes they've done manual underwriting and sometimes they've done, the conventional process. And they'll make sure to weigh the pros and cons of that as well, too.
Sure.
So if anybody's in the market right now to refinance or for a mortgage, if you're in that position of being able to put at least 20% down, definitely, I think we both recommend Churchill as well. So Jesse,
Yeah.
if you could go back, what would you do differently? Because it sounds like you've mitigated the pain as much as humanly possible.
Repaired some of the damage.
Yeah. So if you could go back, what would you change?
I would just slow down. And I think that's one of the biggest things with most of the financial decisions. Probably if you asked everybody you've asked, I've watched some of these videos of lessons learned. I think we would all say slow down. It's not a panic, and especially right now, I feel like talking about the housing market is so important because people are foregoing their inspections right now because it's such a competitive market. They're paying over asking price, which is going to put them upside down on a house. And that's not what you want for your future. Okay. We can't just get so caught up in the present that we ignore the future. And sometimes what we do is we're just like, oh, I put blinders on. We put blinders on, and I found a bank that I liked, and I liked the people. And they said, well, we would recommend a 20-year. You can do a 15 or you can do a 20-year, and it would still be the adjustable rate. I got scared of the difference of the $250 a month. I was like, I got to do all this repair. I got to make sure I have my cash. We could have done 30% down and fixed things slower, but we had a 5-week overlap between our apartment and our house. So we spent 5 weeks of redoing most everything, new floors, got rid of the popcorn ceiling. We got rid of the popcorn ceiling while the pink shag carpet was there to catch it. And then we rolled it up and then took it to the dump. Then I did the floors. We repainted everything, redid the cabinets, put all new doors on. There's doors with holes in it. It's a 1986 house. And so I would just slow down. There weren't buyers. This house had sat on the market for several months. They had dropped the price. It was $10,000 lower than they had originally started. We offered them $15,000 less because we wanted to be in our price range, and they met us in the middle. And I was like, okay, we can compromise if you pay our closing costs. So we paid no closing costs.
Awesome.
And they were the sweetest family. It's funny because their last name was my mom's maiden name, and I was like, maybe we're related. But they're a sweet Christian couple. So this was back when we would still all meet at the closing table. I mean, 6 years ago, we were still meeting at the closing table. So we didn't know them, but we met them, and they were just sweet. It was a house they'd inherited. But there weren't people busting down the door to buy a pink carpet house.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's so interesting because now you can put in offers and close on a house and go through the whole process without ever even seeing the real estate agent, which is just unbelievable. It is a very faceless process now when you're buying it from the person you're buying it from. I mean, it's almost like you have I hate to say it, but you have as much regard for them as you do for the car salesman. It's like, dude, I'm just here to get the best deal. I don't know who you are. And maybe that's good in some situations, but you know, in your situation, you got to meet the people. I've never met the people who owned the house before us. So
yeah, they were sweet as could be. One of the issues that I see consistently is the easier a financial process gets, the dumber mistakes we make. Okay. So if you don't have to see the real estate person, people are buying houses sight unseen. And I'm like, I would never do that. I had an inspector come, and I didn't pay for the cheapest inspection. I paid for the good inspection, who did like infrared readings and was like, hey, you might want to put some insulation here, but here's this. He crawled up and he spent like an hour and a half in the attic in Florida. Nice. I mean, thankfully it was December for him, but he spent an hour and a half in the attic. We had him inspect 3 different houses that we put offers in on. So, I mean, I ended up spending like $1,500 with him.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But it was fine. I crawled up in the attic and I said, hey, show me what you're seeing.
Right.
That's trying to make an educated decision. But when you don't see the sale, you don't see the real estate agent, you don't see the house, you forego the inspection, you don't know what you're buying. You could be buying a $350,000 house that's worth $175,000.
Yeah.
Right. And same thing with student loans. I know I'm coming back to student loans, but they've gotten easier and easier and easier to get, to apply for. You don't even leave you can do it from your bed with your phone. Just okay, I got a $20,000 student loan, and I don't even have to use it for tuition. I can use it for student expenses, which means I'm going to go live in the apartment with the lazy river.
Exactly. I know. I can't remember what I was talking to a client, and they said, oh, so and so sent me a FAFSA form. And I'm like, who? Like, it was her bank or something like that. I'm like, why is your bank sending you a FAFSA? I don't understand. And it's like you said, it's gotten so easy now that pretty much everybody is encouraging it. Everyone's doing it. Everyone's utilizing it to help themselves. And yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like her bank emailed her a FAFSA form. I'm like, on God's green earth, why is your bank emailing you FAFSA form?
Yeah. So the easier the financial process is, the more I say slow down and stop and think.
Right. And, exactly.
I would have looked at it and been like, oh, an extra $200 a month to be in a 15-year fix, that shaves 5 years off my mortgage. Let's do that. And the interest rate's gone up. Actually has gone down a couple years. But the first 3 years it didn't adjust, and the last 3 years it has. So at one point it was at 5.1, and then now it's last year it adjusted back down, and this upcoming year it's staying the same. But I would slow down. I would go to more local banks. I would have gotten more involved with Churchill. I'm very old school, even for being 33. I like to sit down with a human being when I'm talking through these things. That was the one thing that I didn't want to do with Churchill. Now we're working more from home. We're doing more things on Zoom. Now I'm like, oh, I would have met with them on Zoom. But 6 years ago, I still had, and I still like having an old school mentality, because I think some people laugh at me. They're like, you're an old soul. I'm like, thank you. To me, that's a compliment. Yeah. But working with Churchill would have been better for me. Or working with different, even if I did do the dumb mistake of getting the adjustable rate, doing a 15-year would have been moving in the right direction.
It would have been slightly less dumb.
Right. So I don't think it's really, it's probably cost me hundreds, not even thousands of dollars in difference in interest, even with the fluctuation. But if they wanted to, they could raise it 1% a year, and it could top out at 10.75%. Wow. Which back in the 80s and early 90s, people were paying that. And now, like, you said you saw somebody with 2.75, like, you talk about 10.75, it's like, what on earth?
My parents' interest rate was 18% in New York in 1980 something.
Wow. Yep. And so, like, now I'm like, that's a terrible number. But now I understand it better. I should have sought wise counsel. But I didn't know that financial coaches were a thing. No. And the people that I would have talked to about mortgages, like, so many people fudge the numbers, even people who've gone through Financial Peace, who've led Financial Peace. I've got a friend who's led it. He's probably led it close to a dozen times. Different churches in the area call him. They're like, hey, we know that you've led this. And so he loves doing that. But he said, we took Financial Peace. We did a 30-year mortgage, and now they're doing double payments because now they're at a different position. But there's so many people that fudge those numbers. But those are the numbers that you're going to have this for 15, 20, or 30 years.
Right.
or I
Right.
mean, or we're going to move, but still slowing down and saying, what is the best, not just for right now, but what's the best thing for my future?
Right. Taking that extra time. Absolutely.
Right.
Jesse, I really want to thank you for your honesty and sharing your financial blunders with us. I'm very glad to hear that that you don't consider it the dumbest thing you've ever done anymore, since you've, like I said, mitigated the pain as much as humanly possible. So I think this is a really good example of how you can do something stupid and you can learn from your own experience and not just the experience of others, right? We've got it. Sometimes this is just trial and error and we've got to figure it out on our own. So thanks, Kristen, for watching. I saw a couple other people on there. Steve, we'll talk to you guys soon. And everybody, if you've missed, I saw a bunch of people sign in late. So if you guys missed the first half of my conversation with Jesse, make sure you check out the Grace Financial Peace YouTube channel and look for another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. Thanks again, Jesse.
Thanks, Suzanne.